Ja. Ja,
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, Commissioner designate, Mr. Wojciechowski. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wojciechowski, I would like to welcome you on behalf of all members of the Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development. Your presence constitutes a highlight for our Assembly, and you are not in uncharted territory. You are a member of this committee for 12 years, and during that time, you were also a vice chair of that committee before you left this parliament to become a member for the Court of Auditors, where you've been for the past 3 years. Before focusing on EU affairs, you held important legal functions in the judiciary of your country, from judge on the district court to judge at the High Court of Justice. And you also played a significant national role as a member and Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Poland, as Under-Secretary of State at the Cabinet Office for Legislative Affairs, and elsewhere. I'd like to remind this committee that in accordance with our rules of procedure and the guidelines set out therein for the approval of the Commission, the Parliament will evaluate Commissioners designate on the basis of their general competence, their European commitment, and also their personal independence. Members also assess the candidates' knowledge of their respective portfolio and their communication skills. I'd also like to remind you that the Commissioner designate, Mr. Wojciechowski, replied in writing to a preparatory questionnaire. And those written answers have been distributed to members in all official languages. Finally, I'd like to recall that the Commissioner designate, Mr. Wojciechowski, excuse me, says the Chair. Finally, I'd like to recall that the Committee on Legal Affairs has raised no objection to the holding of this hearing. Before we come to our debate, there are a few structural elements that I'd like to remind you of. Firstly, the Commissioner designate will be invited to make an opening oral statement of no more than 15 minutes. He will also get 5 minutes at the end of the meeting for a closing statement. And thank you, Mr. Wojciechowski, for respecting your speaking times in advance. Now, after Mr. Wojciechowski's introduction, there will be time for 25 questions from members. The debate will be held in slots of 5 minutes each. There'll be 1 minute for the question and 2 minutes for Mr. Wojciechowski's answer. If there are follow-up questions, the question should not be longer than 1 minute each. So 1 for the question, 1 for the reply. Thank you again, colleagues, in advance for respecting this schedule. The first round of 7 questions will be asked by representatives of political groups, the coordinators. The second round will constitute 18 questions, and those will be based on the overall distribution of questions among the political groups, including a representative from the non-attached members. There's also interpretation provided today in 23 languages. All speakers are therefore welcome to use their own language, but you are reminded that what you'll say will need to be interpreted, and therefore please do not speak too quickly. Okay. Good. Well, I think it's about time for us to start our work. Mr. Wojciechowski, I'd like to give you the floor for a presentation of no longer than 15 minutes. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. This is great honor and also great challenge for me to be here in front of you. As Mr. President mentioned, I was 12 years members of European Parliament, members of Agriculture Committee, and Vice Chairman of this committee. I was cooperating with a lot of you. And last 3 years I spent in European Court of Auditors, and also the agriculture is area my responsibility. I presented here last year Court Auditors reports about the Young Farmer Scheme, Rural Development Programming, and also I had the contact with with ENVI committee. I presented reports about the food safety. Last time was presented my report because my candidature to the European Commission was presented by one of my colleagues from the Court of Auditors about the cross-border healthcare. Will be presented my next report about the antimicrobial resistance, linked also to the agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, during presentation of my report about the young farmers schemes in this committee, I presented also the kind of shocking information, shocking for some audience, that during 1 decade, from 2005 to 2015, we lost 4 million farms in European Union. The number of farms was almost 15 million, and after a decade, there was less than 11 million farms. It means that we lose 4 million per decade. It is 400,000 per year, more than 30,000 per month, more than 1,000 per day. Our debate is planned for 3 hours. It means that during this debate, more than 100 European farmers probably will lose their farm, their job, and for many of them it will be tragical, very dramatic situation, because it's not so easy to be today to be the farmer and tomorrow to do something different, to be taxi driver, for example. In many cases, this is dramatic situation for the European farmers. We know that for example, in France, there is the problem of suicide among the farmers. There is now is being shown the movie based on the true story, Au nom de la terre. This is tragic story, French family which lost incomes and they lost their farm. And maybe I'm too pessimistic at the beginning of my speech, but I promise that in further presentation I will be more optimistic. But there is anecdote, what is difference between pessimist and optimist. The pessimist is generally better informed. It's very important to have the real picture of the situation in European agriculture. One of the reasons that I decided to be candidate to the position of the Commissioner for Agriculture, that I answered positively for this proposal, is that this is the chance to create a long-term vision for European agriculture, a long-term strategy. This is one of my tasks, which Madam President von der Leyen sent to me in my mission letter. One of my tasks, of course, if I will be approved by the Parliament, is to create long-term vision for European agriculture. We have long-term vision for climate policy, long-term vision for energy policy. We don't have long-term vision for future of the European agriculture. This is very important to have such vision, because the farmers ask us, what will be our future? What will be future for our children? This is very important to give the answer, to give a positive answer that there is future for European agriculture. To create a long-term vision is very important. Maybe any additional remark that such vision had the European leader like President de Gaulle, Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, Prime Minister Fanfani, who were European leaders when Common Agriculture Policy started, 1962. Common Agriculture Policy success story in European Union. Thanks Common Agriculture Policy, we have agriculture, we have food security generally, which is ensured. Of course, there is a lot of weaknesses, a lot of needs for reform of Common Agriculture Policy, but this is the success story. It was long-term vision at that time, long-term vision European politicians who decided to create Common Agriculture Policy. Now we need long-term vision how to reform this policy, how to ensure future for not only for the European farmers, but Common Agriculture Policy is not only problem of farmers, it's problem for all society. For farmers, we have to protect them, to save European farming. But for the all society, this is the problem: food security, food supply security, food safety also, and agriculture is also very important for the planet. The agriculture is very important for climate protection, for the environment, for the protection of biodiversity, also for animal welfare, which is an important issue for me, because in this parliament I was also chairman of the animal welfare intergroup. To create long-term vision for agriculture is very important to have a true picture of the current situation. And ladies and gentlemen, one of my first action, if I will be approved by the Parliament, will be to prepare a special report about the current situation in European agriculture. A report presenting where we are and where are we going, how many farms we have now, how many farmers, what is the generational situation. We know from the report of the Young Farmers Scheme, which was presented by me in this committee, that this is a big problem with generational renewal in European agriculture, and we should to compare the situation between, I propose last decade, what was 10 years ago and where we are now. This is very, very important to have true picture about this current situation. It should be the good base for the programming of the future development of European agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, very important thing is that we have the project, the program, European Green Deal. I'm convinced that green agriculture is the best solution for the future of agriculture. Environmental friendly farming, this is the chance to propose the good, to propose the support for the farmers who better protect environment, who better protect climate, who improve the animal welfare standards, rural development programming, in which we have 30%, which we should to spend minimum 30% for the environment and climate. This is big chance for especially for the small family farms in the European Union. I can promise that if I will be the commissioner, I will strong support the all actions which will be helpful for small and middle-sized farming, especially for family farming. Ladies and gentlemen, that my idea is for the future is to be open for the dialogue. Dialogue, of course, with you as a member of the European Parliament, and to the dialogue with our farmers organizations, with all society, with NGOs which are interested about the European agriculture. This is very important because the good policy should be created with dialogue with all our partners. Ladies and gentlemen, we have chance, big chance, to create a long-term vision for European agriculture, to create better future for our farmers, better future for European agriculture, better future for our environment. And if you approve me as a candidate, I will work together with you, together of all stakeholders, to implement such vision, to work for such future of the European agriculture. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wojciechowski, for that presentation. And thank you for staying well within your speaking time. I had omitted to say something earlier. I would like to inform you that this hearing is being web streamed live online on the European Parliament site, and it will also be possible to watch a video recording and access that through the Parliament site as well afterwards. Let me now move on to the second part of the hearing and give the floor to Mr. Albert Dorfmann, one of the coordinators. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Wojciechowski, Commission Designate, you said that you would be continuing CAP reform from next month. Currently, you are still a member of the Court of Auditors. And when I look back at what the Court of Auditors said about the proposals for CAP reform, well, how does that gel with what you said here and in your written comments? I get the impression, at least, that you have performed a complete volte-face within the space of a year, or at least that you must have dissented with the view of the Court of Auditors because they were very critical of these reform proposals. Now, I completely concede that you were consistent in your written answer and your speech that you need to defend a model of agriculture based on farmers. But if I look at developments over the past year, say in terms of investments, of non-EU investments, there's huge land purchases going on by external actors. So how do you want to deal with that? Because that's nothing to do with farmer-based agriculture. Then there's still that historical legacy, the historical model of Pillar 1, of direct payments and bridge payments. Again, that's got little to do with protecting farmers. So how do you want to reconcile those two issues?
Thank you, Mr. Dorfmann. We have on the table the proposal of the reform prepared by current Commission, by my colleague, Mr. Commissioner Hogan. This is the typical situation in European Parliament, that in the European policy, common agriculture policy, that Mr. Cioloş, as a commissioner, was implemented the policy prepared by previous commissioner, Madam Fischer-Boel. Mr. Hogan implemented the policy prepared by Mr. Cioloş. If I will be the commissioner, I will implement the proposal, the initial common agriculture policy based on the proposal Mr. Hogan. But this is the chance to change this proposal. Of course, I'm representative of European Commission now, and I represent the Commission proposal. But I'm open for the further discussion and to change, to improve this initial proposal. Commission proposal is only initial proposal, and maybe it was not clear in my written answer. And I'd like to declare now very clearly that I open for the further discussion and for the discussion about the EU proposal, EU amendment, improving the Commission proposal. The proposal of the Commission is not the Bible. We can discuss how to improve, and about the Court of Auditors' opinion, I know, of course, I participated. I was not the main rapporteur of this report. I know the critical opinion of the Court
Herr
of Auditors.
Wojciechowski, kommen Sie zum Ende.
Mr. Wojciechowski, could you wrap up, please?
That common agriculture policy should be greener, Court of Auditors said, and I think will be greener. This proposal is greener agriculture. Thank you.
Herr Kollege Dorf.
Mr. Dorfmann, do you have a follow-up? Yes, thank you. So a very specific question on historical payments. Do you agree with me that that model of historically based payments should be given up, and that we should develop a new method of dividing up payments under Pillar 1? And do you also agree that this is a particular problem in disadvantaged areas? For example, in mountainous areas, they are sometimes at a serious disadvantage when money is distributed, so they're on a double disadvantage. It's harder to farm and they get less money.
Herr Wojciechowski.
I agree with you, Mr. Dorfmann, that this is the question which we should discuss, and which we should improve if it will be possible. And I agree that there are problems of farmers in the less favored areas, like in mountains area, and we should see the European agriculture everywhere. They are not the same conditions for European farmers, and we should take it into consideration, of course.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Mr. Paolo De Castro for 1 minute.
Grazie.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Designate, we are facing a global emergency, and we're seeing that in the increasing number of climate disasters that impact our rural areas and all of our citizens. In order to effectively tackle these threats, we need a shared approach, one which is well coordinated. However, the proposed reform of the CAP that's being discussed at the moment actually delegates to member states all responsibility for planning strategies to try to tackle these phenomena. If we don't have a range of measures that are defined at EU level, then I think we'll be missing opportunity for an EU policy to protect our soils and to ensure consumer health. I would just remind the commissioner designate that intervention under the CAP, do you think that we can intervene in the way that is needed? Are we up to the task to ensure that we can have sustainable development and also to ensure an ecological transition and to make a significant contribution to the new Green Deal that you referred to?
Wojciechowski für 2 Minuten.
So Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
I hope, yes, that, of course, there is discussion how much decision on the European level about the agriculture, how much on the national level. I remember a lot of discussion in this committee that common agricultural policy should be more flexible because we have different situation among the member states. This is different type of farms. There are member states in which farms are very big. There are member states in farms are very small. And, for example, generational situation is very different in member states. This was, I think, that this is the reason that flexibility is necessary. This is a renationalization, maybe, I think not. We have common objectives, common interventions, and common indicators. And maybe, of course, Mr. De Castro and all members of this European Parliament, I'm open to discuss. Maybe there are doubts about the control system will be effective or not. It was the doubts of the Court of Auditors also that this performance approach, maybe it will be not enough for the control. I can promise one thing, that the very important step is the approval of the national strategic plan. I will do everything which is possible that common agricultural policy should be more environmental friendly, more friendly for the climate. But once again, this is not the finish of our work. I'm open for the further discussion and improvement of the proposals.
Herr Kollege De Castro.
Mr. De Castro, have you got a follow-up question?
Sí.
Yes, Commissioner Designate. We're not denying that we need enough flexibility in public intervention for agriculture. However, we have to ensure that the EU remains in the lead and moves it towards more ambitious targets. Expenditure based on performance, that was at the basis of the model. However, many members of the committee and the Court of Auditors that you're a member of believe that the current system, based on conformity with rules that are the same for every European farmer, can at least safeguard the common shared dimension of the CAP and to ensure that the EU is able to face up to the imminent threat of climate change. Now, based on what you said in your written responses, it's vital to have amendments to the current legislative proposal, having identified the best possible systems to overcome the risk of renationalisation. Would you agree with that?
1 minute, please, Mr. Wojciechowski.
I open for the further discussion about this matter. That during the legislative process, Mr. De Castro, I will, maybe later, I will read you this is my obligation sent by Madame von der Leyen to be open for the dialogue, to cooperate very closely with European Parliament. I know your position and other members of Parliament. They are questions which should be seriously considered in the further procedure. Also the question mentioned by you. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Müller.
Thank you. Mrs. Müller, for 1 minute. Mr. Wojciechowski, in your suggestions about the structure of DG Agri, state aid was one of the areas where there was going to be changes, and this has meant that the whole portfolio has lost importance. Also, you as Commissioner are going to take responsibility for transitional arrangements, and until the new CAP comes into force, there will be a gap, and the transitional rules do need to be used to make sure that it is possible for the member states to prepare themselves for the new delivery model. Do you agree with my point of view on this? And if so, how will you ensure that the transitional rules are conceived in such a way that they can be phased in to make sure that the new delivery model can actually be utilized? Thank you very much. Mr. Wojciechowski for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Miller. The question of state aid, of course, this is decision of the President of the Commission. This state aid, this is mainly question of competition. But I know that we have the problems with state aid in European Union. I know that the Court of Auditors report that there is a lot of irregularities in this area. The 20% of the state audit cases audited by the Court of Auditors were partially illegal or fully illegal, and I will have a lot of work about the agriculture, about the introduction of the common agriculture policy, about the introduction reform. Is not big problem to cooperate with Commissioner for State Aid about this for the competition with subject of state aid in agriculture. But the transition regulation, of course, transition regulation is prepared, that will be adopted by the Commission. We will discuss about this proposal in the European Parliament during further legislation procedure. It was necessary to prepare this proposal because it should be continuation. The idea is to continue current common agricultural policy with new budget, and I think that we will be ready to start the new legislation, new common agricultural policy from the 1st January 22. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Müller.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller, do you have a supplementary question? In the European treaties, it says that farmers produce our food and they have to guarantee that. And we've got Article 42 of that, which is there precisely to ensure that an extraordinary situation is guaranteed. So that's why we've got these special arrangements. So how do you want to ensure that in a slightly hollowed out DG it is going to be possible, given that these powers are going off to DG competition, that the importance of this for young farmers who need, and we need to have a holistic view of agriculture, that we don't see it being watered down? The transition rules are necessary to ensure that we get this system change put into force. We're going from compliance to performance, and we need to use the interim to make sure that we get it transferred across properly. Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I have no much to add for my previous answer. There's transition regulation. This is necessary because what we can do another. We need to it should be not interrupted common agricultural policy. And about I fully agree with your opinion that food, the main obligation of the farmers is, according to the treaty, is to ensure food security for all European citizens. And our obligation as European politicians is to support farmers to achieve this objective. Generally, we have food security in European Union, but it is not always very clear. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much. Mr. Häusling.
Ja, Herr Designate.
Thank you. Commissioner Designate, you've given answers that I thought Mr. Hogan had written down for you first, because you read that, then you said everything is crucial, you think that Mr. Hogan's proposals are all fine, but you're not really giving specific answers. You're not telling us what you specifically want to do to combat the massive loss of biodiversity. Agriculture is one of the main causes of biodiversity loss. You're not providing any answers say that how you want to get 40% reduction of greenhouse gases in agriculture. You said, oh, we know what to do, the member states will just have to implement that. That's not a proper answer from a commissioner designate. I'm expecting a commissioner to put forward new proposals, and so my specific question is, will you be doing that? How specific will you be in naming your targets? Could you name some specific targets in your vision of the future? You haven't even mentioned organic agriculture. What do you think about that? You haven't even mentioned pesticide reductions. That was in your mission letter from Ms. von der Leyen. How do you want to achieve those targets? You're extremely vague on that. So could you be a bit more specific, please, how you want to achieve those things?
Herr Wojciechowski für 2 Minuten.
2 minutes.
Very difficult to present everything during 2 minutes answer. But Mr. Häusling, of course, I will present my approach, my proposals to support farming which is environmental friendly, which is protecting biodiversity. For example, to support small farmers, only example, who used feed from their own farm, not to import soybean from Brazil or Argentina, to use for the in animal farming the feed which was produced in their own farm. I will support the animal welfare. I said before, is very important for me. To improve animal welfare standard, less density of animals, to use natural method like summer grazing, or in pig farming, to use the straw for the pig, etc. I will propose such proposal which are generally more environmental friendly. Environmental friendly farming. This is my idea.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much. Mr. Häusling, for your supplementary.
And please for Mr. Häusling. Okay, well, I didn't really get an answer in that, but I look forward to your proposals. You talked about small-scale farms and the unequal distribution of funding. How do you want to change that situation, that we can support small-scale farming better and you don't get massive farms benefiting from area payments? There are big differences between member states. I mean, the Baltic states, for example, get a fraction of what other member states receive. And thirdly, cuts to Pillar 2 and rural development. I see there's a 30% planned cut. How can you justify that? Because rural development surely needs to get more investment than elsewhere.
Wojciechowski für 1 Minute.
Mr. Wojciechowski for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. There is to support small farmers is possible. For example, from the second pillar, I observe this problem that many funds from the second pillar are addressed for the small group of beneficiaries. For the big farms, this big part of the second pillar is addressed to the small number of big farms. It should be more democratic. More farmers should be also beneficiaries of the second pillar. Like this, I said before, environmental friendly farming, ecological farming, organic farming. This is the direction. I will support this direction of the reform. And second pillar is big chance for the small farmers too.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Mr. David, now for 1 minute.
Vážený pane,
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, will you, as part of the policy of CAP reform, will you, as part of that, make sure that farmers in all member states get comparable subventions and support depending on the conditions in those member states? Will you respect the differences between conditions between member states? That's one question. And my second question is, will you support the concluding of trade agreements which will allow a huge amount of food imports and agricultural imports into the EU? I'm thinking of projects such as Mercosur, the Vietnam and Ukraine trade agreements, etc.
Vielen Dank, Herr Wojciechowski.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. The problem of Mercosur and generally the trade agreements, yes, there is a lot of farmers are worried, are afraid about the consequences of this trade agreement. They are sensitive sectors in the agriculture. I can declare that I will monitor the situation, and next year, 2020, will be prepared by the Commission impact assessment, evaluation of all potential consequences for the European farming because of after the trade agreements like Mercosur or other agreements with Australia, New Zealand, and others. And of course, the farmers should be not victim of the international trade agreements. If they are victims, our obligation is to help them, to support them, to use market instruments for the intervention, to help them. We have experience, for example, with Russian ban. This is farmers. I can promise that in each situation I will in favor to support farmers, not to be the victims of the trade agreements. About the differences between member states, of course, this is very sensitive political question. External convergence. I think we are on right way to the right direction, but political decision how far we go to the external convergence is on the hand the Parliament and the Council.
Kollege David, haben Sie ein...
Mr. David, do you have a supplementary?
chtěl bych se zeptat,
Thank you. I'd like to ask whether you have any ideas for any other possible mechanisms we could have to prevent the impacts of the trade agreements that we've concluded. Other ideas than supporting farmers after they have incurred losses.
Wojciechowski.
Mr. Wojciechowski.
It should be general principle in the international trade that we should require the same standards from the importers than from the European producers. I give you an example that I was responsible for the audit about the food safety, and one of findings of in this report it was that there were products imported from South America which were produced using pesticides which are forbidden on the European Union territory. It should not happen. The control system should be strengthened, and generally we should use the principle that the same standards should be required from the importer than from our farmers, our producers. Thank you.
Kollege.
Mr. Kuźmiuk, for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Chair. Commissioner Designate. To start with, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation, which sets out your intentions for the coming 5 years, but also a longer-term vision. And now my question. The European Union is the top exporter of processed food, and in 2017, that was over 140 billion euros we got in turn that, and we've got a trade surplus of about 20 billion euros in that area. But for non-processed goods, there's a completely different picture. It's about 50 billion euros and an import of about 80 billion euros. So we have a deficit there for over 30 billion euros, and that trend is not changing. So I'd therefore like to ask you, what is your view on that problem in securing European food security?
Wojciechowski für 2 Minuten.
Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
Of course, this is your figures are true, and the success story of European food, that European Union is netto exporter of food products, of course, but the success is based on the import. This is the success story of the food industry, but not fully success story of the European agriculture. This is, my answer can be, this situation on the international trade, that European agriculture needs more support. Needs more support to ensure food security for the European citizens. Thank you.
Herr Kollege Kuźmiuk haben.
Mr. Kuźmiuk, do you have a supplementary?
Pan wspomina.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, you referred to your report earlier when you were on the European Court of Auditors and supporting young farmers from CAP resources. Now, that report wasn't very positive on the CAP. You referred to that report at the beginning of your introduction, and you said too that 4 million farms have been lost over the past 10 years. And I wanted to ask about the next financial framework. Will the resources under the second pillar be easier to use so that we can stem that hemorrhage? Thank you.
Wojciechowski für
Thank you.
1 Minute.
Thank you that you asked about the Court of Auditors report. Very, very important report. Yes, of course, we spent, during 2 financial perspectives, we spent about the 10 billion euro for support to young farmers. And in this time, the number of young farmers was reduced from 3.3 million to the 2.2 million farmers under 40 years. Situation is very different among the member states. There are member states in which the majority of farmers are over 65, like in Portugal, for example. There are member states in which situation is better. Germany, Austria, Poland, they are relatively in a better situation. It shows that the policy for young farmers should be flexible. We should use proper instrument to the situation in the member states. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flanagan, for 1 minute.
Many of the questions I was going to ask have been asked already, so I'll move on to the issue of importation of beef and trade deals and Mercosur, and also trade deals, also the situation whereby currently, from my information, we have about 300,000 tonnes of beef being brought into Europe every year. In the Mercosur deal, there is something called a safeguard mechanism, which allows both blocs to impose temporary measures to regulate imports if unexpected increases of certain products would harm certain sectors. Now, I would imagine if it's there for unexpected increases of certain products, it should also be there, or is it there, in a situation where we have potentially an expected crisis coming up at the end of this month, whereby European beef producers will lose, well, Ireland alone, access to a market of 250,000 tonnes. If we end up with a crash-out situation and a no-deal Brexit, how will these safeguard mechanisms be implemented? Because surely we should take care of our own market first and look after others later. How will you do that?
Kommen Sie zum Ende. Herr Wojciechowski, 2 Minuten.
Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Maybe my answer will be maybe not precisely enough, but I can declare in this situation, Mr. Flanagan, that I heard about the problems of Irish farmers, not only Irish, beef producers in European Union. After my appointment, of course, if you approve me as a candidate, I go to the Ireland to see the situation, to ask the Irish farmers what they need, what is necessary to help them. I declare this, but not only for the Irish. This my way of work will be to talk with the farmers, to try to find solution together with them. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, yeah. Well, I hope you follow up on that and do that, because it's a very serious situation. In relation to antimicrobial resistance, how are you planning to deal with the issue of AMR? And are you going to be proactive in proposing alternatives to intensive farming, and thus dealing with one of the root causes of antimicrobial resistance? Because we are in a position to do something about this here, and if we don't, humanity will not thank us for it. Your children, your grandchildren certainly won't thank you for it, because if we don't do something about it, well, they don't have a future. So what's your plans when it comes to AMR?
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Mr. Flanagan, could I just tell you that wasn't a follow-up, it was a completely different topic you raised there, so that's not really within the planning. Mr. Wojciechowski, you can, of course, answer if you wish.
Okay, I'd like to answer for this question, because this is my last audit, which I was responsible. It was about the antimicrobial resistance problem in medicines and also in farming. I cannot to say about the results of this audit, findings of this audit, because official report will be presented next month by the Court of Auditors. There is a problem. I can say only I know this problem, and we should act to reduce using of antibiotics in farming, of course. And your question about the intensive farming, I'm very favor to support not intensive farming. Intensive farming is not good solution for the environment, for the climate change, etc. I will, the commissioner, supporting not intensive farming.
Vielen Dank. Wir sind jetzt
Thank you. Well, that concludes the coordinators' round of questions. I would like to thank you, because we are at 3:25, which is well within the time we had allocated for that. And we're now moving on to the next questions, further 18. And I'd just like to point out that I'll be trying to manage that quite strictly. And the first speaker is Mr. Zoido Alvarez.
En 2018.
In 2018, the United States imposed 35% on table olive oil imported from Europe. These come mainly from Andalusia and Spain, and businesses there are suffering, and thousands of jobs are at risk. This is an attack aimed at not just Spain, but the whole of the agro-food sector in the EU, and this won't be the last. Now, the Trump administration is threatening us again. And he is looking at cheeses, for example, olive oil, fruit, meat, drinks and spirits, and so on. If there was to be a new import duty, a lot of companies would no longer be able to import to the American market, and hundreds of thousands of European jobs would be at risk. This is an unsustainable situation. So what specific measures will you take as Commissioner to protect the agro-food sector in Europe from protectionist attacks such as this one? Thank you.
Herr Wojciechowski.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
These problems of Spanish producers, Spanish farmers, and what I can answer today, that I can declare that I will act together with Mr. Commissioner Hogan, responsible for trade, to recognize better this question and to try to find any instrument to help for the Spanish farmer. I don't know exactly what is the problem. This is unfair trade, maybe, but what we should do, we will discuss with Commissioner Hogan. Thank you, Mr. Zoido, for this signal. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Seuder.
Thank you. Mrs. Zoido, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank the Commissioner Designate for his response, and particularly the initiative of speaking with Commissioner Designate Hogan. He is the current Agriculture Commissioner. And to discuss this with him so that you can be prepared if this is to occur. There are a number of victims of this in Andalusia and in Spain, and so the Commission has to act before it's too late. Thank you very much to the candidate.
Herr Wojciechowski für
Mr. Wojciechowski for 1 minute.
Once again, thank you for Mr. Zoido that you said that we have a very serious problem, and we should to find the solution for this. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Agi.
Thank you. Mrs. Agrillo for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you and welcome to the candidate. I would like to refer to the new strategy that the Commission President wants to see from farm to table. I think this is one of the few positive aspects that we've seen since the mad cow crisis. We want to see a more sustainable approach. And so the first question I would put to you is, does this mean that we are seeing a genuine EU food policy? We can draw on the broad experience of DG Agri, where we coordinate all DGs that are involved, for example, internal market, health, competition. If so, that would be good news for me and for this committee. However, the letter from the Commissioner only asks DG Agri to make its contribution to farm to table. Does this mean that you're going to be leading the strategy? What will be the situation? Thank you.
Herr Wojciechowski für 2 Minuten.
Mr. Wojciechowski for 2 minutes.
For this question, of course, this is very interesting, very important strategy. Agriculture is only part of the strategy. And Commissioner for Agriculture, DG Agri, will participate with this strategy, but it is, as you mentioned, that this is the strategy for public health, for DG Sante, for the competition, for environment, and etc. The most important thing is that is very important what we eat, but also there is important how we produce our food, how we produce, in which way. Our obligation as a agriculture, my obligation as a commissioner, if you approve me, of course, for agriculture, is to promote, to support sustainable agriculture, food production, which is, I say it again and again, environmental friendly, protecting climate and animal welfare, etc. This is very, very, it is one of the reasons that long-term vision was one reason, and this is the second reason. This strategy, sustainable production of food, that I decided to participate in this mission. And yeah, thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you, Ms. Aguilera. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, we agree. But what I'm trying to say is that what we want is for this coordination under this new strategy. Well, DG Agri does have experience of it, and within your file to really lead it. The agricultural policy was our very first type of policy, and we don't want it to be used just for food policy. We have to be ambitious. In October, we are seeing demonstrations from the olive oil sector in Spain. We're with them and support their initiatives. I would like to see you offer support to this sector as well, Commissioner.
Vielen Dank, Herr Wojciechowski. Für
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, 1 minute.
As I declared before, yes, of course, I can declare again that that this problem of the Spanish producers of olive producers, I'm very interested to help to solve this problem. And about the from farm to fork strategy, maybe this is not especially new for the agriculture. The new is the common structure of this proposal. But for agriculture, it means that we should do more for the environment and for the climate, for the biodiversity protection. We did before, but now we do more effectively. Yes.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cioloș, 1 minute.
Domnule comisar desemnat.
Commissioner designate, I'm often asked what kind of a concrete project we can propose so that Europe can regain faith, the faith of the citizens. And I think the CAP can play such a role because Europeans understand that quality food, diverse food, biodiversity, living together in nature can be better ensured at the European level. But first of all, we need to ensure a decent livelihood for farmers. There is a bit of a feeling of weakness now about the CAP, which leads to a transfer of responsibilities towards the member states. I would like to know that you are committed to avoid the renationalization of the CAP. We would need to give a vision to the CAP that is adapted to reality. And I would ask you, in case you will get the responsibility of dealing with the CAP, will you be engaging with us, with the European Parliament, so that we create a new vision for the CAP to put food and natural...
Please wrap up.
Mulțumesc.
Herr Kommissar, für 2 Minuten.
2 minutes, please, Mr. Wojciechowski.
For this question, of course, I will cooperate very closely with the European Parliament to create the long-term vision for agriculture. You will my first partner for this debate, European Parliament, and this is very important to have support of the European citizens for common agriculture policy. There is support. Majority of European citizens understands that we need support our farmers, that common agriculture policy is necessary, and but the expectation of people is that agriculture policy should be more friendly for environment, climate, once again, for the animal welfare, for the biodiversity protection, that intensive farming, people are worried that industrial farming. This is a threat for the environment, for the climate also. Then we should give very clear signal for the public opinion that common agriculture policy is the direction of this policy is environmental friendly, support for environmental friendly farming. And about the renationalization, as I answer for the Mr. De Castro question, I'm open for the further discussion. Maybe in some solutions is too far to the direction of renationalization. In my point of view, this is not renationalization, but maybe we need more control on the European level. I am open to discuss with you and to improve this initial proposal. Thank you.
Kollege.
Thank you, Mr. Cioloș. Do you have a follow-up question?
Comisar desemnat, o să auzi...
Thank you, Commissioner Designate. You will be hearing within the Commission as well that you will be told that this cannot be done or that cannot be done. I would like to know if you have a clear commitment in order to give a new political impetus to the CAP, so that we might be able to close discussions on this draft reform that we're discussing and to start talking about perspectives, to give a new perspective to the CAP, which would mean more than allocating money to each member state, to have a new vision about agriculture. And I would like to know if you have a commitment that from you that beyond all of this talking where we get into a lot of details, if you have a vision and a commitment about what a policy for food and agriculture and natural resources should look like.
Wojciechowski für 1 Minute.
Thank you. 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much for this question. Of course, I have this motivation to work together to create a vision. We should our discussion about the future of agriculture to this time it was always perspective 5 years because we have new parliament, new commission, new commissioner, and for 7 years sometimes that when we discuss about the new financial perspective. Now we are in the special moment. New parliament, new commission, new financial 7 years perspective, and new common agriculture policy. It is a good moment to start debate about the long-term vision of agriculture, a long-term strategy. I invite all of you for close cooperation to create such vision. It will be if at the end of my term as a commissioner, if I will be approved, we will have such vision will be my and will be our common success. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sander, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner Designate, price volatility of primary materials and climatic problems, all these different events influencing the income of European farmers. This is what happens with climate change, and as we try to align European markets to world prices, these changes come with a cost, and agricultural sectors are not generally exempted from this rather sad, almost daily reality. So we see this in parliamentary reports produced by the current Agri Committee. Basic payments, the decline in farmers' incomes, consolidation of the omnibus regulation, the creation of an early warning system for the crises, and strengthening the agricultural crisis reserve. Now, all of these things are going in the right directions, but in your reply, there was not a single word about those aspects. So given that Council is divided on these matters, will you commit yourself to modernize these tools to face the market shocks and protect our farmers?
Wojciechowski für 2.
Thank you. 2 minutes, please, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Thank you. Maybe my written answer was not precise enough, but of course I can declare Ms. Sender, we should do more for the better protection of the farmers on the market. There is a lot of problems on the common market. We have experience how to help farmers in this situation. I said before the Russian ban on the other crises, but we should do more because this support is sometimes not enough. I know that this is one of the most important challenges for the European Commission, and I can declare that it will be a very important part of my mission as a commissioner to strengthen the system of market intervention.
Frau Kollegin Sander.
Thank you, Ms. Sander. Do you have a follow-up question?
I'd just like to come back to these risk management mechanisms, particularly when you've got a sudden drop in exchange rates. You've got these rural development programs, and it's left up to member states, but few member states have used them. And it's the same, take-up by farmers is low because they're very costly. So I've heard the Commissioner designate say a few words about this, but in real terms, how will you put yourself into making sure that these tools are properly developed?
Wojciechowski.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, 1 minute.
My answer in this question, you understand, cannot be very precise as a candidate to be commissioner. But I can declare that as a commissioner, I will cooperate with the farmers, with members of parliament to find good solution to strengthen the system of protection of farmers. This is one thing which I say now as a candidate to be commissioner. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you very much. Ms. Avram, 1 minute.
Mr. Wojciechowski, at the beginning of this hearing, you were telling us about the millions of farms that have disappeared, about 4,000 farms disappearing every day, and that during the time of our hearing, many farmers will go through tragedy. There's the climate emergency, the market turbulences, the external markets, the differences between the member states. But there is also another matter, which is the relationship that the farmer often has with the big retailers, whom you have mentioned in your written answers. You've talked about the weak position of the farmers and that you want to redress this, because you were saying that farmers do not need to be on a lower rung compared to the retailers. What are the concrete steps that you will take in this direction? How are you going to solve this problem, the weakness of farmers compared to retailers?
Für 2 Minuten.
You 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Avram, for this question. And 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 2007, as a member of parliament, I was one of the authors written declaration adopted by the European Parliament about the calling European Commission for the action better protection of the farmers in relations with retailers. And I remember that this action to collect signature for this written declaration in the European Parliament was supported by the farmers' organization in many member states in the European Union. And after successful action, I asked them that I'd like to thank them officially for this support. And they say, no, Mr. Deputy, it will be better not to say that we supported this action, because they were afraid about the negative consequences from the big supermarkets, etc. And now this is maybe a long-term consequence of this action, not only this, but many actions in this direction, that we have unfair trade practices regulation. My obligation as a commissioner will be to ensure implementation of this regulation, and this is the way for better protection of our farmers in relations with retailers. Thank you.
Frau Kollegin.
Ms. Avram, have you got a follow-up?
De acest timp suplimentar pe care
I would like to take advantage of this extra time to give the opportunity to Commissioner Designate Wojciechowski to say something concrete about what he's going to do and about this plan, this in-depth analysis that he says will take place in order to have a clearer idea about the position of farmers and retailers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1 minute, please.
Wojciechowski.
As I said before, to ensure implementation, the implementation of this new legislative instrument, and also the next is to permanent monitoring of the situation and reaction in each case when European farmers are unfair treated by the retailers, and to use legal instrument to help them. This is they are legal procedure which should be used in this situation. I will cooperate with the commissioner responsible for the competition and other commissioners. This is what can I say now about this.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Mr. Guerrero, please. Mr. Wojciechowski, Mr. Guerrero is behind you, just let you know.
Senhor Comissário indigitado, dadas as
Thank you very much. Mr. Wojciechowski, when it comes to animal welfare, for example, and the dangers of antimicrobial resistance, it's important for the Commission to introduce political changes to ensure food safety in Europe. It's really important for us to introduce new models of animal husbandry and food production to make sure that animal agriculture isn't too intensive and too polluting, and that we don't just focus on quantity but also focus on quality and using the resources we have. And against that background, how do you want to deal with those issues? Do you want to create a new animal welfare strategy, for example? How do you want to integrate animal welfare into the new common agricultural policy? And what does DG Santé want to do about that? How do you want to involve DG Santé in everything? Thank you.
As improvement of the animal welfare standards, this will be one of the key issues in my functioning on this position, and I'd like to say very important things, that this is my experience from the audit about the animal welfare, which I made as an auditor. I was responsible for the first in the history of the Court of Auditors audit about the animal welfare issues, and the observation was that more effective is system when we encourage farmers to improve the standards. Not the repressive system, but to encourage for improvement of animal welfare standards. In the current RDP, we have instrument, animal welfare measure, the number 14, and in the rural development programming, but it was used in a very small scale, that it was an 1.5 billion euro during all perspective, and we should spend more for this action, and to encourage farmers to improve animal welfare standards. For example, less density in farming, less summer pasture, summer grazing, and to use the less density in pig farms, to use straw for the pigs, etc., etc. There, I will support this kind of farming, and for me, I agree that it's better to have 1,000 farm with 100 pigs than one farm with 100,000 pigs. It's better for the environment and for the money, other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Guerrero, do you have a supplementary?
O comissário indigitado ainda focado.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wojciechowski, I would like to come back to animal welfare, because we can see that as a consistent failure in implementing of animal welfare measures. Take live exports, for example. That's been a point of contention for a long time. We know that live transports are a real issue. Animals go a long way in really poor conditions. So my question to you is, will you try to tackle the problem of live transports to reduce that and in the long term solve that problem? And how can you solve that financing problem? Thank you.
Thank you. This is a very important question, but my idea is to create alternative for this this business, but it is not clear for me why it is economically possible that, for example, cattle from Ireland, they are transported to the seaport, but by truck, across the sea, and to the Middle East, for example, very, very long transport. And of course, this is the export. But if we support, this is the direction, is support circular economy, support farmers who produce with link with the local industry, local meat industry. The animals are not transported for the long distance. The production is for the local market. This should be alternative, which should be supported from the European funds.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bisotto, please.
Grazie. Thank you. European Union is often just used as a bargaining chip in trade agreements with third countries. Sugar, milk, fruit and vegetables are often subject to unfair competition from third countries. They produce with lower standards, and so the prices are lower. So how, over the next 5 years, do you intend to protect the competitiveness of European farming, and particularly small-scale producers? And how do you intend to promote this in trade agreements with third agreements, and in particular with a focus on geographical protections and indications?
Thank you very much. Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
This question, this is very, very important issue. Yes, I remember as a member of the parliament was the same problem. There was answer many years ago, one of the commissioners for my question about why in relations in the international trade, the farmers are not protected enough. The answer was because we have more interest in industry than in farming. But farmers should be no victim of the international trade. I can declare that I will very closely cooperate with, first of all, with Commissioner for Trade, and to protect farmers in trade relations, that our farmers should be not the victim of other, not the victim of other business. Yeah. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Bisotto, zur Nachfrage.
Thank you, Ms. Bisotto. Your supplementary.
Le guerre commerciali diplomatiche vanno sempre a colpire i nostri.
In trade wars, we see that this mainly affects our farmers. We've seen this with the United States and with Russia. We're talking about $1 billion just that's been lost from Italian agriculture, and we could have avoided that. So I'm asking myself and you, will you be bold enough to protect European agriculture? Will you have the courage?
Für eine Minute.
1 minute, please.
My answer is very short, yes. I will have such courage to protect the farmers. I understand my function, my role as a commissioner for agriculture, to be advocate of the European farmers, where in the situation where it is needed. Of course. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you very much. And now, Ms. Aguilar, 1 minute. Mr. Wojciechowski, Ms. Aguilar is also behind you, just so you know.
Commissioner designate, I have a question for you. Now, there are differences within European agriculture. You have to remember that we have Mediterranean agriculture as well as intensive agriculture. Also, colleagues, can you ensure that we can avoid the European Union sacrifices its agriculture in trade agreements? And then can we ensure that we use science and knowledge for the environment? So my question is, if there's going to be a lower budget, more obligations, an obligation to produce more, what kind of instruments or new incentives are you going to make available to farmers to ensure that they can compete in a much more globalized market?
Wojciechowski, 2 Minuten.
2 minutes, please, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this question. And I agree that we should see the problems of agriculture, European farmers in whole Europe. Not we sometimes there is we create our opinions about the situation in center of Europe, but there are specific problems in south of Europe or in outermost regions. I remember during the sugar market reform is very important. My visit as a member of this committee to Reunion Island or in the Canarian Island, because they are banana producers and they are special sectors which we should which we should protect in European Union. About the ecology, I'm in favor of like animal welfare. This is one of my key ideas, but the farmers should be encouraged to improve the animal welfare, should be supported. This is absolutely key idea. Support for the farmers for voluntary improvement of animal welfare standards. Not extremely ecologist. I'm not extremely ecologist, but farmer is naturally ecologist. I heard opinion that farmer is the first ecologist, but we should support farmers in this direction. We should help them, not fight against them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aguilar, for your supplementary.
Commissioner designate, as you know, our farmers have fewer SPS products that they can use. The EU has blocked new breeding techniques, and basic scientific research is leaving the EU. So what significant changes do you plan to enact in order to reverse this trend? Thank you.
Für eine Minute.
Thank you. 1 minute, please, Mr. Wojciechowski.
I can say now that I'm open for the discussion about this subject. I have I'm not ready to have good answer to the good concept, full concept for this question. We should to discuss about this and to find good solution. I open for Mrs. Aguilera and other members of parliament to discuss about this question.
Vielen Dank, Kollege.
Thank you. Mr. Yar, for 1 minute.
Thank you. Commissioner Designate, in your written answers, you said that you'd like to continue and indeed conclude Phil Hogan's progressive reforms to change the system of direct payments in favour of smaller family farmers. We discussed this in the Agricultural Committee, and my question is, what do you think of the compromise concluded in the Agricultural Committee on direct payments to small-scale farmers? And do you not also think that it's high time to eliminate the differences between direct payments in member states? This is for differences within member states. And perhaps there was an interpretation problem, I don't know, but you talked about intensive and industrial agriculture in the same sentence. For me, there's a difference there.
Wojciechowski.
Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, of course, there is differences between. This is not the same. Intensive and industrial. I see the problem with too much intensive, too much industrial farming. This is the problem. This is the kind of pathology in our agriculture. And about the differences between farmers and the question of internal convergence, yes, this is one of the questions which was mentioned in the Court of Auditors' opinion to the future of the CAP. There are differences sometimes 10 times in the same member states. One farmer receives €100 per hectare and his neighbor 1,000 euro. It's not easy to change radically this situation. It's not easy because there is sometimes question of the structure of the different structure of the different size of farm, etc. We will in the long-term vision for the agriculture, we should find the good solution for this. I'm open for the discussion. In the current proposal, Mr. Hogan proposal, there is the step to this direction, but not enough. I agree with you. This is the question for the further discussion, Mr. Yar.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you, Mr. Yar. Follow up?
Entschuldigung, vielleicht habe ich...
Yes. My apologies. Perhaps I squeezed too much into my initial questions, so hence my follow-up question. Now, in the Agricultural Committee, we had long discussions. We found a compromise which will, on one hand, ensure that small companies will get additional payments on degressivity, and that there are very different conditions in different member states. We need to do both at once, CAP and supporting small farmers, but we need also to leave enough flexibility for member states to act and to set up a system which is as free of red tape as possible, but also secure. So my question is, are you pleased with our compromise on degressivity?
Wojciechowski für 1 Minute.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski for 1 minute.
I can answer that I'm ready to discuss in the future about this compromise. We have on the table Commission proposal, and this is very interesting compromise. I generally in favor for the flexible approach, for the possibility to member state to decide, because we have different situation. We have member states like Czech Republic, where the size of farm is more than 130 hectares. There are member states like Poland, where is the 10 hectares medium size of the farm. There are member states like Romania, there is less than 10 hectares, and our approach should be flexible for this the question of the small farms, big farms. We have 80,000 farms over 250 hectares. 80,000 farms in the European Union. They receive 22% of the direct payment.
Dank. Frau.
Thank you. Mrs. Katainen. She also is sitting behind you, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Arvoisa komissaari ehdokas, mehän tiedämme kaikki, että
Mr. Commissioner Designate, we all know that it's only profitable agriculture that is going to allow us to have food security. And I wonder what you'll be doing to preserve agriculture which is profitable and also helps us to fight climate change at the same time. How are you going to ensure that with CAP reform, agricultural production is kept profitable across Europe, even in the least favoured areas? And how also will you ensure that rural development financing and compensation for natural disadvantaged areas will play a role in the future? We've had a financing package announced with a direct link to the second pillar of the CAP. How will you ensure that the financial sector is not going to come up with sustainability criteria which will overlap and add to those that exist and will make the situation almost impossible? Mr. Wojciechowski, for 2 minutes.
In my opinion, the sustainable agriculture, the agriculture with higher environmental standard can be competitive if we will support this farming. This is not the question that we should support intensive farming because it is economically more effective. Maybe in short perspective is more effective. In long perspective is less effective. And this is the cost to support. This is our cost to support farmers who protect our environment, who protect our biodiversity, etc. But this is, in my point of view, this is no choice. We have no alternative. We should support such farming. This is absolutely necessary. And together with farmers, supporting farmers, not against the farmers, not to force them, but to support them. This is the sense of the common agriculture policy, I think. First pillar, second pillar, all common agriculture policy. This is my answer. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you. Mrs. Katainen, a supplementary?
Ja toivottavasti jatkossa voimme keskustella
I hope that in the future we'll be able to talk about the taxonomy and sustainability criteria. My follow-up question is to do with the second pillar. In your written answer, you said that it's important that rural areas remain vibrant and dynamic, and I think it's great that you're of that opinion. But there are cuts that are foreseen for the second pillar. This is highly regrettable, and not all member states necessarily have the possibility to be able to plug those gaps, and so we need greater flexibility between the pillars. Would you be prepared to give more flexibility to member states that would seek to implement environmental measures under the second pillar?
Eine Minute.
Mr. Wojciechowski?
Of course, I will support the decision of the member states about the transfer between pillars to both sides, from the second to the first pillar, or from the first pillar to the second pillar, because it is necessary for the. We have different situation in member states, but in each case, it should be benefit for the environment, for the climate change. This is very, very important to ensure this consequence of the transfer between pillars. Decision how amount will be spent for the second pillar is for both pillars, but especially for the second pillar. You're right that in the Commission proposal, the amount we had about 100 billion euro. Now we have less than this 80 billion euro. This is political decision, Parliament, Council, Member States, how big will be finally the budget for the second pillar. Having more money, we can do more, of course.
Vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rondinelli, for 1 minute.
Grazie.
Thank you. Commissioner designate. Over the last 5 years, we've seen an agriculture commissioner who distinguished himself by not wanting to protect the main areas of his portfolio. We saw that this has then led to him being nominated as Trade Commissioner. The trade agreements over the last 5 years have significantly penalised the European agricultural sector, particularly those farmers who want to produce quality products and make that the cornerstone of their work. Agriculture has been a bargaining chip to get advantages in other sectors in trade agreements without any proper compensation, and this has led to crises and loss of jobs. In order to defend the interests of big international lobbies and make trade agreements easier, the last Commission even allowed glyphosate to be and products using glyphosate to be imported into the European Union to the detriment of consumers. The agro-food sector on global level has grown significantly in recent years. The speaker's lost her microphone. The speaker lost her microphone.
Wojciechowski, bitte.
Mr. Wojciechowski, please.
Yes, of course, but this is not my role to comment the activity. The previous commissioner, the European trade policy, trade defense, defense of interest of our farmers in trade policy will be subject of the new audit of the European Court of Auditors. Will be occasion to evaluate what is the situation. But I can declare that I will be active commissioner for this to protect farmers in the situation when there is a risk that they will be victim of the international agreements, trade agreements, etc. I can declare that I will be active, but now I can say this. Thank you.
Kollegin Rondinelli zur Nachfrage.
Mr. Rondinelli, a follow-up?
Microphone, please. Microphone, please.
Is it? Now it is, yes. Voglio chiederle.
So, how do you plan to promote European agriculture, and how can you ensure that you are involved and a protagonist in upcoming trade agreements to ensure that you protect European agriculture and their interests?
1 Minute.
Mr. Wojciechowski, for 1 minute.
Of course, as I said before, the very important document will be this impact assessment. Firstly, we should have knowledge about all potential consequences, trade agreement for the agriculture. We should know everything about this. And after that, it's necessary to find solution, to find instrument, how to protect the farmers. Because, of course, there are reasons that they are trade agreements. This is the Mercosur. It is not the crazy idea, but the problem is that how protect the farmers in this agreement. And we have chance to protect farmers, but firstly, we should know all potential consequences. Impact assessment is very, very important document. Will be ready next year.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Neuchel for 1 minute.
Ich habe eine Frage.
Thank you. Well, I've brought a question with me. The EU has committed to the UN Sustainable Development Targets, the so-called SDG goals. SDG 5 and 15 are close to me personally, and let me start with 15. Protecting terrestrial agricultural systems, protecting the environment, sustainable forestry, fighting soil erosion and the loss of biodiversity. This is a worldwide challenge. So what is the role we can play in our agricultural policy to contribute to that? And again, I would like to ask you specifically what you think about, say, about feed import sustainability, say soya imports coming here to Europe, social, environmental, cultural impacts and economic impacts of those imports. What is your stance on deforestation, which is caused, among other reasons, by clearances for soya plantations? We want the EU to cover agricultural imports under SDG 15 and to avoid negative impact. So would you endorse that, and would you support the Parliament's calls for sustainability for feed imports? Thank you.
Wojciechowski für 2 Minuten.
Wojciechowski for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. A lot of questions, but you said about the import of soya. Now there is a necessary, because our animal farming needs this feed, but soya is for the animals farming. But we import 40 billion soya per year. It is very big import. As I said before, we can support farmers, and from the second pillar, who don't use imported food. For example, this is one of possible action, and it will be one of my proposal for this. And sustainability is a very important task for agriculture, and we should do it. But sorry, I forgot your question.
Microphone, please, Ms. Neuchel. Oh yes, forestry.
Thank you. And the desertification was the similar question. Desertification, we have the new audit report from the Court of Auditors. There is a problem, for example, the protection of soil. We don't have regulation about the soil protection. This is one of the reasons of desertification. Also, of course, climate changes. Farmers are victims of the climate change in this situation, because desertification is a very serious problem in European Union. There are recommendations for the court. I will cooperate with Commissioner for Environment to solve this problem in the future. About deforestation, fortunately in European Union we don't have the problem deforestation. The forest area during 20 years was increased about 11 million hectares. But the deforestation in other continents, yes, of course, we should pay attention for this problem with international cooperation.
Kollegin Neuchel zur Nachfrage.
Mrs. Neuchel, a follow-up?
Sie haben die
Yes. Well, you've represented EU agriculture as a victim, but actually my question was phrased the other way round. You know, as a perpetrator, how is the EU and EU farming perpetrating and co-responsible for deforestation at the other side of the world? So my interest would be, for example, what your view is on the EU's responsibility that we have as the Agriculture Committee to fight deforestation worldwide.
Wojciechowski für.
Mr. Wojciechowski for 1 minute.
Maybe this controversial opinion that agriculture is responsible, because agriculture, the farmers are forced now to use this imported feed. This is necessary, but once again I answer, we should support the circular farming, local farming with local industry. It will be one of the method to reduce import from other continents.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Mr. Kalinowski for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Now, there have already been payments about levelling out differences in payments, so I'd like to come up to the draft budget for the next financial period, which has a conditional clause attached to it, a conditional access clause. And that clause is conditional on respect to the rule of law and financial regularity. Now, if any member state were to fall foul of that clause, then it'd be farmers who'd suffer first and foremost, because 50% of a farmer's income comes from subsidy. So what is your view of that instrument, Mr. Wojciechowski? That's my first question. And my second question is about the strategic plan and member states' obligations in, say, of defining terms of a young farmer, because it's very important for a country such as mine. In Poland, over 50% of CAP payment beneficiaries aren't actually farmers, they're landholders.
Wojciechowski.
Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes to answer.
About the active farmer definition, I agree, yes, we need such definition. I can declare cooperation during further legislative procedure to discuss about this. And about the first question, conditionality, the rules of law and the consequences for the budget, I can answer that we have an opinion of the Court of Auditors about this question, about the proposal of the regulation. I can read only the titles of chapters, this opinion. This is not I was not author. This one of my colleagues from the Court of Auditors was author of this. No, this is the whole court is responsible for this opinion, but prepared by one of my colleagues. New mechanism with much discretionary power for the Commission. No specific stakeholder consultation done, no impact assessment done, source of guidance and criteria are not clearly specified, no clear obligation for the Commission to assess possibility to lift measures at its own initiative, no requirement for the Commission to assess the potential impact on financial beneficiaries and the national budget. This is not my role to evaluate the Commission proposal, but according to the Court of Auditors' opinion, this proposal is not prepared well. I can say only this. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Kollege Kalinowski, zur Nachfrage.
Thank you, Ms. Kalinowski, for a follow-up.
Thank you. Well, on the active farmer, I'd like to come back to that. Even more so because the government that you mentioned, sir, as working on the solution was in fact opposed to the solution. As for the conditionality, I have a question for you, as a future commissioner. I mean, if you're a farmer, then there's a big expectation for you to convince the College of Commissioner, but perhaps people further afield, to exclude farmers from that clause, because surely, it's collective punishment. It's not fair for farmers to be punished to pay the highest price for a government's fault. 50% of a farmer's income would be taken away from them, and I can't imagine that any other occupational group would stand for that.
Wojciechowski.
Okay, but I think that will be discussion in the new Commission about should be discussion about this proposal, and opinion of the Court of Auditors, very critical, should be seriously considered. It will be my proposal to very seriously consider objections of the Court of Auditors for this proposal of conditionality.
Vielen Dank, Kollege.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy for 1 minute.
Commissioner, I want to refer back to your opening statement where you referenced the fact that the EU is losing farms at a rate of about 4 million per decade. And I want to save you the expense of having to carry out an assessment or a study to find out why that is the case, and explain to you that it's because farms aren't viable. Farmers aren't making a profit, and therefore they're being forced off their farm. And I want to mention two areas that need to be addressed if we're to tackle that. First is reform in farm payments. Currently, about 125,000 of the wealthiest farm enterprises receive about €13 billion in CAP payments. That's about 10% of the overall EU budget, not the CAP budget. The overall EU budget going to that small number of farm enterprises, while most farmers receive a pittance in comparison. Secondly, within the agriculture model, we have seen ongoing and strengthening consolidation within corporate processors and retailers, and the European Commission has sat by and allowed that to happen. And that has in turn depressed the prices that farmers are receiving. It has led to unprecedented protests in countries like Ireland. So my question to you is, what are your plans to ensure the redistribution of farm payments and to tackle the dominance of a small number of corporate interests in the agricultural sector?
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. I do apologise for saying Mr. McCarthy. I meant to say Mr. Matt Carthy. Mr. Carthy was your name, and Mr. Wojciechowski has the floor for the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Carthy. And of course, the European Union can not decide about the prices on the market. This is not. Market is free, but in each case, I will be ready as a commissioner to hear the farmers, to recognize their problems, and to try to find a solution. I will be the commissioner open for the dialogue with farmers. This is, I can promise. You're right that is big problem. This differences between small and big farming. We know that 20% of the biggest farmers received 80% of the CAP budget, and the rest, 80%, receive 20% of the budget. But how to change? This is the one of the questions which we should solve during this debate about the long-term vision for agriculture. Now, no, there is no solution in the current perspective. No, but maybe capping is the one solution. Maybe active farmer can be one of the solutions to change this situation. But generally, this is very good thing for the discussion about the long-term vision of the agriculture. How farms should be supported. Where is the place for the small farms, for the big farms? They are questions which we should find a common answer. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Kollege Carthy.
Thank you. Mr. Carthy, a follow-up?
Is that working? Yeah, I don't know what that was, Commissioner Designate, but it wasn't an answer to my question. I have a feeling that you're going to be back before us again before this is finally over. But for now, can I just give two specifics and ask you, can you give an opinion on that I believe would help resolve the problems that I outlined? One is for us across Europe to have a hard mandatory upper limit payment on high payments, so that the balance can be redistributed to ordinary farmers. Do you support that? And secondly, I believe firmly that in order to tackle the dominance of a small number of processors and retailers, we need to introduce a ban on below-cost selling by retailers of agriculture products. Can I ask you, would you support that measure also?
Wojciechowski.
Thank you. 1 minute, please, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Of course, the dumping should be forbidden in European Union and everywhere. That I have experience as a former member of the European Parliament. There was a successful action against dumping prices for the strawberries imported from China many years ago. And but the question the capping question, this is one of the most important questions, but it is necessary to find a political solution. Position of the Commission now is voluntary capping. Member States should decide. And this is argument is one for the voluntary capping, not mandatory, not obligatory, that we have different situation in Member States. Big differences between scale of size of farming. I said before, 130, this medium size, 30 hectares, this is medium size farm in Czech Republic, 10 hectares in Poland. It's very difficult to find the same solution for all member states. This is the reason that this proposal voluntary. Commission proposal is mandatory, but there is argument about I understand the position that is can be voluntary.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cavalli, 1 minute.
O Sr. Wojciechowski reconheceu.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, you have recognized that rural areas require additional attention. And there are also the outermost regions in the EU. And here we have structural problems in these areas, sorry. You seem to be wanting to bring together lots of objectives, lots of different strategies. I would like to know what specifically you want to do to rehabilitate rural areas that are already being affected by desertification, depopulation. And often these areas have a very complex socio-demographic profile as well. The populations are aging in these areas, for instance. And the small-scale farmers are the backbone of these areas. What do you plan to do?
2 minutes, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Madam Carvalho, for this question. As I said before, I fully understand the problems, specific problems of the farmers in these regions, like Azores. I visited this region, like Madeira, like other outermost regions in Europe, in Spain, Spanish regions and French, Reunion and Guadeloupe. They are special problems, but we have the POSEI funds. The proposal of the Commission is to continue this system of support. Maybe this is not enough. I'm open for the further discussion. That I will remember all farmers in Europe, also for the farmers in outermost region. I have experience because I know this region. Maybe not all of them, but majority of them, and I understand the specific situation of these farmers.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Cavalles.
Thank you, Ms. Cavalles. Follow up.
Pode aqui então garantir de alguma forma?
Thank you. Can you guarantee that you will make the main commitments made by Mr. Hogan to protect the POSEI regime and to avoid any budget cuts? Is this a message that I can pass on to my citizens that you're taking this commitment now?
Nochmal zur Antwort 1 Minute.
Thank you. 1 minute for answers, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Fossil funds are reduced like all common agriculture policy, but I'm open for the further political discussion, political debate about the budget of the CAP, also budget for POSEI. That if will be political agreement, political support for this idea to keep the POSEI on the current level, I have nothing against of this.
Vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you. Ms. Scott-Cato, 1 minute.
Chair. Mr. Wojciechowski, the UN has made clear that we need to use our land as a carbon sink in order to stay within the 1.5 degree warming limit. And there's a big opportunity here for farming to be part of the solution to climate change and biodiversity collapse. So I'm just going to explore a little bit more by what you meant when you said you support green farming. We need an organic system of farming that will build carbon-rich soils without the use of toxic chemicals, and we need to restore wetlands, peatland and forests. We need to eliminate food waste and stop the import of soya that drives deforestation to feed too many farm animals. Public money should support farming practices that work with nature and use natural processes, especially mainstreaming crop rotations, including legumes. We need to make farming resilient using agroforestry and living soils to prevent flooding. That's our view of green agriculture. Are you ready to play a leadership role in overseeing this transformation of our agriculture system? Will you lead the European Green Deal for agriculture?
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam, for this question. Yes, my answer is yes. I'm ready. I'm fully ready because it was one of the reasons that I positively answered for the unexpected proposal to be candidate to the European Commission. This the possibility to change European agriculture to this direction, more green agriculture, which is very important. But with the farmers, not against the farmers. It's very important that I can sometimes hear the opinions that maybe I'm in favor to force farmers to the green agriculture. No, to encourage them, to support them, to help them, and finally to help for all society. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you. Ms. Scott-Cato, follow up?
Well, I think you know that we're going to be holding you to that, and I'm wearing my green jacket here today, and my colleagues will make sure that this does happen, because business as usual is not an option for farming and for our land use. And I would also say that we're not against the farmers either, but what we are against is the agri-businesses that actually make farmers dependent on them, that encourage them to use chemicals and machinery that they can't afford to pay for. That is not the green way. And so will you challenge the domination of agri-businesses in our farming sector so that we can have a truly green future for farmers?
Herr Wojciechowski nochmal.
Mr. Wojciechowski, 1 minute.
My answer will be shorter than 1 minute. Yes, I agree with you, Madam.
Das war kurz.
Okay, that was indeed brief. Mr. Christensen, 1 minute.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to put a question to the Commissioner. Would you give us the possibility for being able to define in a more open way what is agricultural area so that a farmer can have a greater degree of flexibility to cultivate his land? It's absolutely critical that we should create incentives for greater biodiversity without farmers risking losing their basic income. I think this is common sense and will have a big impact on our agriculture and on biodiversity. How will you ensure that European farmers can deliver the increasing demand for more sustainable food production at the same time as they have the possibility to reach and attain the climate objectives? Agriculture is a part of the solution.
Danke. Wojciechowski.
Thank you. 2 minutes, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Thank you. This difficult question, but this is, I can say what should be our approach to the agriculture and what is my approach to the agriculture. That we should see the important question. One, they are farmers. The question to the aspects of the agriculture. Farmers, we should protect farmers. We should support them to have incomes, to have possibility to live on the rural areas, to be farmer. And the next is for the whole society. This is the food security, food safety. We should to be secured to have food security. This is very important. And also, I said before, biodiversity, environment, climate change, this everything. We should support agriculture, should be able to guarantee all of these values, to protect the farmers, to protect environment, etc. But can I guarantee I will do everything which is possible for this direction? But the guarantee can be done by the farmers, by the European farmers, and supported by the whole society. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen, follow up.
Will do some.
As a commissioner, would you allow farmers to determine how they produce on their land to a greater degree, and that we get a fairer but more reasonable demands placed on farmers? Ursula von der Leyen said one rule in, one rule out.
2 rules out.
I say one rule in, 2 rules out. Will you work for that?
Hvorfor vil du?
Why will you promote small polluting agriculture to the detriment of big and environmentally friendly? Agree myself.
Wojciechowski für 1 Minute.
1 minute, please, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Thank you. I agree that no bureaucratic rules more. No, that not the one rule, bureaucratic rule more, two less. We should not create the new bureaucracy, especially for the farmers. And yes, but sorry, I've lost the first part of your question. Could you add? Sorry, Mr. President. Because, yeah.
Please go ahead.
This
Why are you promoting small climate polluting agriculture to the detriment of high technology agriculture?
No, this is not that. Maybe it's not clear position. I never said that I support only small farms. That small and medium size and environmental friendly. This is the environmental friendly farming. This is not only small farms. Small farms in natural way are better prepared for this function. But this is not the problem of the scale. This is the problem of kind of farming.
Thank you very much. That takes us to indeed the final person on the list, Mr. Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And dear Commissioner designate, together we will have to decide with due diligence about the future CAP and more than 1/3 of the EU budget. Your integrity has been questioned in 2016 during your nomination process to the Court of Auditors, and more than 400 MEPs of this Parliament didn't give you their confidence at the time. In recent time, we read in Politico and Spiegel that you had some trouble with your travel allowances and that you paid back on your own initiative, you said, some 11,000 euros. So my question to you is twofold. Do you confirm that you paid back this unduly perceived travel allowances on your own initiative? And secondly, how will you manage more than 1/3 of the EU budget if you get confused with your own travel expenses declaration?
Vielen Dank, Herr Wojciechowski.
Thank you. 2 minutes, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Thank you for this question. Olaf concluded investigation, which was started July 2016, and all my travel expenses were checked, more than, I think, 1,000 documents. And but I repaid the travel expenses 5 months before investigation, and I think that this payment from my own initiative, without any request from the Parliament, from the financial service, probably the investigation was not the payment was not a result, but maybe it was the reason of investigation. I paid this amount from my own initiative without any request because there was a risk, only a risk, not correct payment. No €1 was misused from my side. This was, and there is description of, I have in here the Olaf documents describing this case. Only not intentional mistakes which had no influence for the budget. No €1 was misused by me. Olaf conclusion confirmed my public statement on this case. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you. Mr. Hansen, a follow-up.
Yes, please. So you repeated 3 times on your own initiative. So you openly deny that the Secretary General of this House confirmed a recovery of unduly perceived allowances on the 8th of July 2014, and you deny that you appealed to that decision with your letter to the quaestors dated 14th of July 2014, and that the quaestors confirmed the Secretary General decision on the 16th of December 2014, because this was everything before. So on your own initiative, to me, it sounds a little bit different.
Herr Wojciechowski.
Mr. Wojciechowski, 1 minute.
You say about another question. It was the question of the margin, which was I was a victim of this situation, not the proprietor. It was the payment for the travel agency. Travel agency financial service paid too much in its opinion for the travel agency. Sorry, this is not the case, which is something, which was something wrong from my side. Nothing wrong.
Vielen Dank.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Wojciechowski. And thank you very much to all the members, for all participants in this hearing this afternoon. I think that your answers were very illuminating for us. And Mr. Wojciechowski, I'd now like to invite you to conclude with your closing statement of no more than 5 minutes. But before that, let me announce that there'll be a meeting of coordinators straight after this meeting, or rather, straight after this meeting was scheduled to finish. So 17:45 to 18:45, that will be in camera, so no public access to that. And the coordinators will meet to evaluate this hearing, and coordinators will be invited to express their opinion on whether the commissioner designate, Mr. Wojciechowski, is qualified both to be a member of the college and to carry out the particular duties he has been assigned. But now I'll come to the 5-minute closing statement, and Mr. Wojciechowski, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the many pertinent questions you have raised over the last couple of hours. To finish, please allow me to stress what is important to me. I would like to remember one particular word in this afternoon. That word is dialogue. I have always been open for dialogue, and I will continue to be open. I will engage in dialogue with you, honourable members of the European Parliament, as individuals and in this committee. And I will extend that dialogue to all our stakeholders, to farmers, to farmers' organizations and other NGOs with an interest to the agricultural sector. We should work together for the benefits of your agriculture and our countryside. I commit myself to joining you in debates when you consider it useful, keeping open communication channels and always listening to you. As a part of the dialogue, I'm keen for us to cooperate on the development of long-term vision for agriculture. We need an informed debate on what we want for our farmers and our farmers in the decade to come. Such a debate can only be held on the basis of a robust analysis of trends and drivers. Let's us create and share together a vision for our rural areas and our agriculture. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wojciechowski. That was very concise, so we're well within time. Yes, applause is welcome. So that concludes this hearing. We've come to the end of the public part of that hearing. Now, when the political groups wish, then I can say they are welcome to stay in the room and meet in some corner of the room, perhaps if they wish to do so, to have a consultation. But I would like to remind you that the coordinators meeting will start at 17:45. But let me thank all participants and those who asked questions once again, and many thanks to Mr. Wojciechowski. Have a nice evening.